Welcome back to the deep dive
where we take the sources you've shared with us, distill all those core insights.
and give you the intellectual shortcut you need to be deeply, thoroughly informed.
And today we're setting aside the usual world of finance and politics.
We're jumping into a very specific and I think very high-stakes literary adventure, a deep dive into the creative mind of George Saunders and the intense moral landscape of his new novel, Vigil.
Yeah, our mission here is to go beyond just the press release. We want to really excavate the critical themes, understand the author's inspiration, and kind of contextualize why this story is coming from him right now. We're looking for the why behind the wildness.
And what a wild start it is. I mean, our sources drop us right into one of the most provocative scenes I've read about in a long time.
Oh, it's incredible.
You've got this character, KJ Boone. He's a high-powered, totally unrepentant oil company CEO, and he's on his deathbed.
In his, super ornate mansion.
But this is no peaceful passing. His final hours are just chaos. There's a swarm of birds that invades the room. A black calf is just casually grazing on his expensive love seat.
And his spiritual guide, she doesn't arrive with a halo of light. She arrives via celestial reconstitution.
Right down to her favorite black pumps. It's an amazing image.
It is the definitive George Saunders blend, isn't it? That immediate kind of jarring collision of the deeply detailed, almost banal reality of corporate wealth with the raw, anarchic power of the supernatural.
Absolutely. So for everyone tracking this, the novel is titled Vigil. It's set for publication by Random House on January 27, 2026.
And this really continues a path he sort of cemented with his Booker Prize-winning novel, Lincoln and the Bardo.
It does. He's become maybe the preeminent voice in what some people are calling post-death literature.
Yes, but where Bardo was really about historical grief and a kind of communal kindness, Vigil seems to be taking that spiritual framework and weaponizing it.
Weaponizing it? How so?
For immediate, searing moral and environmental commentary, it feels like it's shifting from that quiet compassion to a loud, public, inescapable reckoning.
Okay, let's unpack that. Let's get into part one, the setup.
Right.
The stage is the twilight hour of KJ Boone's life. He's the personification of unchecked corporate power, and he's facing that final passage.
And his appointed guide is the novel's really unlikely protagonist. She's a veteran soul shepherd named Jill Blaine.
Blaine, what a character. The sources give us these amazing, precise details about her.
They do. She died tragically back in 1976, which, squarely places her in the era Boone was probably building his empire.
And she's done this sacred duty an astounding 343 times.
That number 343, it gives the whole metaphysical world this weird, almost bureaucratic feel,
It does. She's an expert in the routine of death. And her arrival, reconstituting as she falls toward Earth, landing in the circular drive down to those specific black pumps, it grounds all the magic in this very human preference.
Exactly. It reminds you she was a person before she was a guide. She brings her own specific human sensibility to this infinite task.
So you would think, after 343 assignments, she's seen it all.
You would. But KJ Boone presents the ultimate core conflict. Her job is normally to comfort, to facilitate acceptance and safe passage.
But Boone refuses the comfort.
Thank you.
The sources are really clear on this. He will not be consoled.
And why? Because he genuinely believes he lived a big, bold life and has, quote, nothing to regret.
Now that's the dramatic catalyst for the whole novel.
It has to be. Saunders is usually praised for exploring, the capacity for kindness and forgiveness. But in Vigil, he seems to be asking a much tougher, more modern question.
Which is?
What happens when the subject denies the premise of morality entirely? When the soul is just utterly unrepentant and self-justified?
So it's not just about the afterlife. It's really a deep dive into cognitive dissonance, right? That mechanism where we rationalize terrible decisions to feel good about ourselves.
Precisely. For Blaine, the professional guide, her standard operating procedure is just useless. She's facing a closed system.
If the passenger denies the need for passage, the metaphysical boat just doesn't move.
Exactly. The source material highlights that the novel is forced to move past kindness and toward confrontation. It flips the whole premise of post-death literature on its head.
Which sets up this expectation for the reader. If Boone won't look inward, the outside world and all the consequences of his actions, they have to be brought in to force the issue.
And that brings us perfectly into part two, the chaotic scene of judgment, what the publisher is calling the wild final evening.
This is where the symbolic forces of nature and consequence just physically break through the walls of the CEO's controlled world.
Yeah, the setting transforms. It goes from a rich man's final moments to this packed, impromptu moral courtroom filled with characters clamoring for a reckoning.
Let's break down the imagery here because it's so potent. It's not abstract guilt, it's specific and shocking. We already mentioned the swarm of birds.
An uncontrollable, chaotic piece of nature invading this sterile, high-end room.
And then there's that black calf. I mean, this detail is just pure explosive imagination.
A grazing black calf on a silk love seat. You have to think about the symbolism. It's the untamed, maybe innocent natural world just reclaiming a little piece of his territory as he dies.
It's nature saying, I'm here and I'll graze where I please.
But the collision becomes really devastating when you look at the human elements.
Right, the man who materializes. Not just any man, a man from a distant, drought-ravaged village.
And that is the direct, unassailable link between abstract corporate greed and immediate human suffering. Boone can deny the science, he can deny the data, but he can't deny the man standing right in front of him.
It's forcing accountability. And then there's that final, deeply chilling addition to the guest list.
The two former oil business cronies,
who appear with chilling plans for Boone's post-death future.
That elevates the whole thing from just a simple judgment to, like, a complex ongoing torment. It suggests that even in the afterlife, the legacy of corporate power dynamics continues.
So they're not there to offer comfort.
No, they're there to make sure Boone's actions keep serving their chilling post-death agenda. The system of greed is inescapable.
So Saunders is using surrealism as a very meticulously constructed arena for moral confrontation.
Exactly. The calf, the birds, the villager, the cronies, all of them together in this mansion. It underlines how the personal cost and the global consequence are inseparable in his view.
And this emphasis on accountability is the perfect setup for part 3, where we get into the thematic weight and the very specific motivation for this novel.
Right, because Vigil is tackling some huge things. The menace of corporate greed, the environmental perils of progress, and that thorny question of absolution.
This is where we get the aha moment directly from the author. He didn't just want to write about a generic villain. He was focused on a very specific demographic that's, well, passing away now.
That's the key piece of context for you, the listener. Saunders said he wondered specifically about the generation of powerful people who used obfuscation and spin, that's his phrase, to put climate progress on hold for 2 or 3 decades.
So he's pointing directly at the architects of climate change, denial, and delay.
The ones who are now reaching the end of their lives. And his question is sharp. Would a person like that, facing the end, feel inclined to repent?
And even if they did, could they articulate it?
That's what's so fascinating. It gets into the psychic cost of institutional denial. If you've spent 30 years building a narrative of self-justification, the mechanisms for a sincere apology might be completely eroded. You might be structurally incapable of accessing remorse.
So the novel moves past a simple condemnation and into this profound look at the pathology of late-stage capitalism.
He's using fiction to impose a moral accounting that the legal and regulatory systems just failed to deliver in real time. He's filling that accountability gap.
So if the real world allowed them to die in peace, fiction is refusing to grant them that grace.
Exactly. And the sources hint that this was difficult to write. They mention that Saunders felt Vigil stretched him, that it pushed him into new territory of voice and intensity and, quote, moral positioning.
He called the process a real adventure.
Which suggests that tackling a truly unrepentant, morally compromised soul forced him to break some of his own narrative rules. It's one thing to explore historical grief in the Bardo. It's another thing to tackle the unacknowledged sins of the contemporary world.
So he had to create a new intensity to match the thematic weight.
I think so. It confirms this book is designed to be an ethical challenge to the reader. By watching Boone's judgment, we're forced to assess our own smaller denials and rationalizations.
So before we wrap up, I think it's useful to situate this new work in the context of his whole career. Part 4. It helps to see how this novel evolves his voice.
Yeah, absolutely. He's always lauded for blending that biting satire with the surreal and, genuine compassion.
Always anchored by a moral compass. He's been a longtime contributor to The New Yorker, and he's taught creative writing at Syracuse since 1996.
Right. And his collections, like 10th of December, that was a National Book Award finalist, and his book of essays, A Swim in a Pond in the Rain, really showed his mastery of literary structure.
And we should also mention his most recent work before this, Liberation Day, which was a short story collection that President Barack Obama chose as one of his favorite books of 2022.
He has such a unique way of capturing the absurdities of American life. He gives them a sharp wit, but the humor always serves a deeper moral insight. Vigil seems to keep the wit, but shifts that insight toward explicit, contemporary consequence.
That journey from the historical kindness of Bardo to the contemporary furious reckoning of Vigil is a really powerful evolution.
It is. And for those of you who want to hear him discuss this new direction, the sources confirm he'll be a featured guest at the 31st Annual Writers' Symposium by the Sea in San Diego.
That's at Point Loma Nazarene University from February 25th to the 27th, 2026.
His specific interview is on the 27th, right after the book comes out, and the theme of the symposium is Writing Across the Divide.
Well, given that Vigil explicitly crosses the divide between corporate malfeasance and the fate of the corporate soul, that theme seems perfectly tailored.
It really does. This will probably be one of the most important literary events of 2026, a crucial insight into how he navigated writing this confrontation.
So what does this all mean for you as a reader? I think our deep dive shows that Vigil is setting up this tremendous, unmissable juxtaposition.
On one hand, you have the intensely fantastical final reckoning, symbolized by that grazing calf and the materializing man.
And on the other, the very real moral accountability for corporate actions that K.J. Boone spent his entire life denying.
The major takeaway is that Saunders is using the extreme, explosive nature of surrealism to hold a mirror up to the extreme existential menace of climate denial and corporate greed.
It's a fictional judgment meant to provoke very real self-reflection.
Exactly. Asking you to consider your own complicity or your own struggle for accountability in the world.
Which leaves us with a final thought for you to mull over. If K.J. Boone represents this unrepentant figure of modern greed, an individual who escaped justice in the courtroom, what does it mean for fiction to host the final judgment that the real world hasn't delivered yet?
Is the confrontation of a black calf on a love seat and a man from a drought-ravaged village a more persuasive, more indelible form of justice than any regulatory hearing could ever be?
And maybe more unsettlingly, consider this.
If the totality of your actions were made physically manifest in your final hour, what would your personal reckoning scene look like?
A deeply unsettling and essential question. We've reached the end of this deep dive into George Saunders' Vigil. Thank you for joining us.
We'll see you next time.